Yeah, in my heart, I'm like, no, man, there's something called truth that's objective. That it doesn't matter what you believe, it's still true. But I'm not a Christian. Nobody's witnessed to me. I'm just yearning for truth. I want stability. My world is spinning, and I want something that's not moving so I can regain, clarity in life. And so that's what started me on the journey for truth.
Welcome to the free sermon podcast of the Potter's House Church in Virginia Beach, affiliated with Christian Fellowship Ministries. Our vision is winning souls, making disciples, and planting churches. It's Tuesday, where you're going to hear a powerful testimony of God's grace revealed in human lives. Each Tuesday, you'll hear Pastor Adam interviewing pastors from around the world to share the mighty miracles that God has done in their lives to give you hope for yours. We share the stories of the men behind the messages you hear every other day on this podcast. Keep in mind that the free version only includes a portion of the whole testimony interview. To listen to the full version, use the links in the show notes to subscribe via Apple Podcasts or supercast.tech. Every dollar goes to supporting world evangelism. Enjoy today's Testimony Tuesday.
Back to the VBPH Sermon Podcast, and we are here for another Testimony Tuesday. I am very excited and pleased to welcome Pastor Eric Barrientes from San Antonio, pastoring in Hanoi, Vietnam.
No, it's in Ho Chi Minh City.
Did I get all that right?
Ho Chi Minh City, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I was just going off of the book. Yeah.
I never updated it.
So I guess that was my first mistake.
I don't want people to find me out here.
So Ho Chi Minh City. And how long have you guys been
4
there?
years. It's actually 4 years, 1 month. We got here February 2019. Yeah.
February 2019. So all the way through the COVID insanity, You guys have been there.
And it was a lot different over here because they locked us in our apartments and we couldn't leave. And so, you can't leave your apartment complex. Some people had it worse than others. My complex had like a grocery store at the bottom of it. So it was all right. We could still get what we needed, our resources and whatnot. And then you had armored vehicles like tanks, small tanks, going through the streets with two ideas. One is a silent idea. One is like a known idea. The known idea is we're patriotic. Yeah, we're going to get through this. The other idea is we're not afraid to use this.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I suppose communists know how to scare people, huh? Well, let me take the opportunity to welcome you and thank you for coming on the show. We appreciate your time. It is 8:57 p.m. here on the East Coast, which means it's 8:57 a.m. over there in Vietnam. So thank you for making the time after a morning prayer meeting on a Friday morning for us. We do appreciate it very much.
That's where we're off right now. So it's 7:50 right now. That's why the timing's a little off. Okay, I got it.
You know why? Because there was a time change. So we planned. I'm sorry.
No worries. It's all good.
My bad. But anyway, thank you so much for being up bright and early for us and taking the time to do an interview. And so, how long have you been a listener to the podcast?
Just recently. Yeah, just recently.
Okay. And we actually I made contact with Pastor TJ Horta, who's also in Vietnam.
Yeah, he's here in Da Nang. He's halfway up Vietnam.
Okay. So I've got him on the schedule also. So we're gonna have Vietnam month on the podcast here.
And you got Rudy right here. That's right. It's good stuff.
Yeah, man. That's it. So he's watching live. And by the way, for those who are watching live on Riverside on this platform here, you can put in questions if you want to. You can submit your question if there's something that I missed, or you want to tell a story on Pastor Eric here that he doesn't want to tell. That would be a great opportunity. So
bring it.
So, Pastor Eric, first of all, why don't you give us the conference style report? Give us the 3 to 4 minutes of where you're from and your wife and what God's doing there.
Cool. So I am from San Antonio, born and raised. My wife's from San Antonio. We have 3 kids. I have an 18-year-old, a 14-year-old, and one who just turned 11 this week. 2 boys and a girl. My girl is in the middle. And we have been here in Saigon for 4 years. We took over a church. It was 4.5 years old. Actually, we took over 3 churches, not at the same time. We took over one in Florida. Then we took over one in Houston. Now we took this one over in Saigon. And God is helping us. We have a very good momentum. We just got out of a rally with Pastor Ruby. And we had people come down from all over Vietnam, from Hanoi, from Da Nang. A lot of people gathered, probably about 140 people for the rally. It's supposed to be underground, but have no spirit of fear, have dominion. Everybody is excited and stirred up for what God's doing. We have one baby church out. They're in District 4. He's been there since August. He took over a church from Stuart and Michelle Palacio. And then, yeah, man, we're having a blast. We're living the dream. That's the way Jason Garcia would put it. Yeah.
That's it, man. That's it. Praise God. Well, I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions because I want to know all about Vietnam. But before we get to that, I would love to hear, this is this podcast. We get to do the deep dive into the story of where you came from and how you got saved. So, yeah, where did you grow up? You said you're originally from San Antonio?
From San Antonio, all around San Antonio, the west side, the east side, the south side, and then eventually landed in the north side. Which are a lot of hoods, basically. And so, I grew up over there near Zarzamora and Winnipeg. It's one of the South Side hoods. And that's where I spent the majority of my time. And so...
What was your family life like?
So... My father and mother, they never officially got married. It was more like a military adding a dependent issue. So my father was in the military, and somehow or another he worked it out to where my mother got added on to one of the dependents, but never went through like a ceremony, never had like an actual wedding day. And that was like my upbringing. That was on the east side. That was for like the first 5 years of my life. And that was rough. It was a rough environment. I have older brothers that are half brothers. And we'd get into trouble outside. We'd have a lot of fun there playing basketball with the neighbors across the street. But there was a lot of like arguing between my parents, whatnot. And so a little rough upbringing. Yeah.
Okay. So, that roughness that you described, did you get into a lot of fights?
Yeah, I got into a lot of fights, but not early on. Maybe around 7 or 8 years old, I got into a few. When I moved schools, and I moved sides of town. A lot of people didn't know me. And I remember there was quite a few people that were trying to see what I was made of. And I wasn't afraid at a young age. I remember we used to run around the school. It was one of the physical education things. And so we take laps around the fields and whatnot. And a group of guys were trying to, intimidate me. And I remember being young, man, little kid. But still, something inside of me said, "Nah, I'm not running. What's up?" And so that's the way it was. I had my older brothers; they would rough me up a little bit as well.
So you were the youngest of the family, or one of the middle?
I'm like the middle, man. So there's a lot of half brothers and sisters. I don't even know the order. That's how chaotic it is. Like as far as who's involved, who's not, on what day somebody's included in the mix and not. And so, yeah.
So, yeah, was it an unstructured environment? Like did you have trouble getting used to things because of the lack of family structure?
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. Yeah, I remember. Let me give you a couple stories. I remember being I don't even remember the age, but very, very young, and I was outside in the front yard on the east side. This is Pecan Valley and Sargent Street. And we used to play basketball at night with our neighbors. There were a couple other boys in the front and hoop with them. And then one day, my older brother, the oldest, we're outside in the front and he's cussing. He must have been maybe about 14 years old, 13 years old, right around there. And I'm a young man myself, and I started cussing with him. And then that day, my father comes home and the neighbors tell him, "Hey, your boys are outside cussing." My father was a Marine for 22 years. And so he was a Marine during that time. And he let me know. He had one of those old school cowboy belts with a big old eagle buckle on the front from San Antonio, Texas. And so, yeah, that day we had a reckoning. Yeah.
It must have left an impression on you.
On my rear end. It sure did. Yeah, man.
Well, you remember? Did it actually? Did you need that? Did you look back on it?
It was okay to cuss back then. No, just kidding. Yeah, I needed that for sure. It was, but just to show how chaotic the situation was. One of the ways that my father would discipline was pretty interesting. He had the combat boots, and so we would kneel down. He would make me kneel down and then hold the combat boots straight out in front of me and just hold them straight. And I guess he had some flashbacks from Vietnam. Not sure. Yeah.
Wow. Oh, so you were holding the boots
kneeling
straight
down
out until your arms couldn't.
Down. Oh yeah,
man.
Young age, young man doing that.
Well, that must have put some toughness in you, I suppose. No wonder you didn't back down when the bullies came.
Yeah.
So, besides the trouble in getting into some scuffles, did you find yourself getting into any other kind of trouble as a kid?
Yeah, not really, not too much.
Oh, so you were trying to keep your nose pretty clean.
I didn't like to get caught.
Okay. So the sneaky one.
Yeah.
Did you do all right in school?
I did all right. One of the things I never really applied myself. So I'd go to school and I'd be there. I'd have fun. Interesting fact: my name Eric is from a fifth grade classmate of my mother's. He was a class clown, and so I've been cursed. And so I like to make people laugh. It's what I do. And that's what I would do in school. I'd make people laugh. I'd make the teacher laugh. It would go well for a while, but then after a while, you got to calm down. And I wouldn't. So I'd get in a little bit of trouble. Never really did my homework. I would always just do the work that was in the class, and then I'd take the test. And I did well enough in order just to keep passing. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about your spiritual history. Did your family ever expose you to any kind of religion or church life?
Yeah, I remember going to Catholic church when I was really, really young. And I'm talking about once or twice, man. Another time I went to Cornerstone, like a small mega church there in San Antonio with John Hagee. I remember going over there when I was really, really little in a maroon Cadillac. And I remember one time I was there in church, I started getting really nauseated and not knowing what was going on. I thought me and church didn't get along. And so I remember I got really sick in Cornerstone, and my father, this is how little I was. He puts me upside down and he has my head facing up, and I'm getting ready to throw up. So he's taking me, he's running me to the restroom. And I remember he barely made it in there. I started throwing up in the toilet. And so at a young age, I thought, man, me and church, we just don't go. Every time we come, I get sick. Only years later to find out that the perfume that my mother wore, I hated it. It just got me sick, you know? And so, yeah, but a few times went to church, not very much. Yeah.
Okay. So going into your teen years, this is often a time when people make some poor choices and bad decisions that lead to some consequences. Do you look back on that time and recognize any of that kind of activity in your life?
Full of it. It was full of it. I started smoking weed when I was 11 years old out of a little foil pipe that you would put foil around a pencil, you'd twist it up. And actually, I shouldn't be giving any instructions right now. But anyways, at 11 years old, at the bus stop, one of my neighbors, she smoked weed with my sister, and then I ended up smoking as well. And so all the way through my teenage years was a little bit of drugs here and there until it started getting serious towards the end of my teenage years.
Wow. So, that's not a cheap habit. That means, how were you able to get your hands on this
Other
stuff?
people smoked weed, and I guess they didn't want to smoke alone. And I made them laugh, so they gave me some weed.
Yeah. Well, you know they've legalized this stuff now, which is crazy to me. But can you talk about how, how do you think that it affected you as you were growing up?
Weed, how did it affect me? I think, you know what, honestly, because I didn't have like a fantastic relationship with my father, I had a level of insecurities. And when I started smoking weed, it would make me feel good. It would be like living some crazy dream for a few hours, but it also intensified the insecurities, the paranoia. And so it wasn't a really good mix. And then there's that peer pressure desire right around the same age. And so it ended up pushing me deeper. It definitely was a gateway drug. Yeah.
Okay. Well, describe where it took you next.
So, 11 years old, smoking weed. I didn't smoke all the time, smoked a few times. And then about a couple years later, then I started smoking weed a lot with some other guys. And one time, the weed that we got, it was laced with something. I never figured out what it was laced with. And I got on a weird trip, started climbing a tree, and the guys are chasing me. It was weird. And then started drinking beer and alcohol, MD 2020s, and getting wasted at a young age. You're looking at like maybe 13, 14 years old. And then Mike's Hard lemonades and Smirnoff, that stuff's like candy for a kid. Then it has the punch of alcohol in it. And so, that was for like the next few years. And it was really just weed and beer and alcohol. Then later on, I remember, I forgot who it was, but somebody they had introduced me to meth. And it looked harmless because they had it on some foil and they lit it up. It turned into some vapor, and all you did was inhale it. And so I remember I did that a few times, but that was it. And then I moved on from that. Yeah. And then during high school, hung out with some cholos there in San Antonio, and a bunch of different people who just like to get wasted. And so that's what I would do. In high school, I met my son's mother, my oldest son's mother, and she ended up getting pregnant towards the end of high school. My last year, my senior year, she's pregnant. I have to break the news to my family. And so I let them know. I thought I was going to get killed, skinned alive, tarred and feathered. But my mother was really understanding. and patient with me, although it still was a wake-up call. It was time to take responsibility. And so I had the fear that I wasn't going to graduate high school. So then right at the end, I started applying myself and pulled it out, graduated high school. And I remember right after I graduated, I had the idea, okay, I'm going to do this right. I'm going to do my best to raise my son. I'm going to be responsible. I'm going to take care of this, even though like this isn't the perfect way to establish something, family. I'm going to do my best. And so I told myself, without anybody giving me advice or trying to help me, I'm going to quit smoking weed. I'm not going to be doing that. I'm not going to waste my life. I'm not going to turn into some loser. And so I did for a little while. And I remember during that time that I was like, man, I can't celebrate with nobody that I've, not smoked weed for a long time because nobody knew. I was pretty good at being sneaky and hiding it. And so, then I started working. I'm kind of jumping around. During high school, okay. I was a skater. I was a baller. I love to play basketball. I love to skate. And I got pretty good at it. I could have been an amateur if I would have focused on it, but I didn't want to get injured and I couldn't go to work. I really wanted to take care of my boy. And so I quit skating. And then I started working 58 hours a week building frac sanders. Frac sanders are those huge 18-wheelers. They have 4 compartments on the side of the 18-wheeler with a hydraulics conveyor belt running through the middle, and it just moves material. You take it to oil fields and whatnot. And so I did that for about 11 months. And then during that time, during one of those lunch breaks, I had a friend who would pick me up from my house, take me to work, and then drop me off in the evening after work. This guy really helped me out. And one day, he passed me a CD case, one of those old school, you don't hear about those or see those anymore. But he passed me a CD case, and on top of it, there was a line of Coke. And so this is during lunch. I feel a little bit of the pressure. I mean, this guy's helping me out. And so I said, okay, did a line of Coke, went back to work, paranoid, super, super paranoid. I'm walking around like, okay, everybody knows I'm coked up right now. My eyes are bugging. I'm breathing all funny, going, and smoking cigarette after cigarette. And then I got away with it. And once I got away with it, then I was like, oh, I can handle this. I could do this. And so I started doing cocaine a lot. Yeah.
Wow. Well, what I was going to comment on, which is interesting to me, is how the arrival of your son into the mix added responsibility to your life, which was actually a good thing. It at least, gave you that pressure to begin applying yourself. And I think this is something that a lot of young men don't really realize, is that they need responsibility. And I'm not advocating that they go out and get a girl pregnant, but what I'm saying is that
don't want to do that.
I mean, unless you're married to her. But the idea is that when you have that responsibility, that is actually a refining tool that God uses to change us. And I look at young men these days that, they're sitting on their rear end till they're 25, 27. And, not getting serious about life. I feel bad for them, man. They need some pressure in life, because this is how you become a man, right?
Every decade sets up the next decade. And there's a book called How to Ruin Your Life by 30 by Steve Farrar. I definitely recommend young people reading that book. And it's one of the first things it says is ignore cause and effect, ignore responsibility. I think Jordan Peterson, the reason why he's hitting well with so many people is because he hones in on responsibility. If you will take up responsibility, it'll add meaning to your life, and you'll begin to feel good about who you are.
Yeah, that's really good. So, well, you were on the right track for a minute there, trying to do right for your son, and that line of Coke changed things.
It sure did.
So, what did that lead to?
I went into another level, another stage of partying and doing Coke. I started, I got really addicted to cocaine. I loved being filled with cocaine. Your senses are super alert. I'm not sure exactly what chemicals are released in your brain, but you're able to move very, very fast paced, process things very quickly. And so it got very addicting. And then after cocaine, it was good for a while, but then it started leveling out. I wasn't getting that same high. So then I went to the next thing, which was either crank or crack, something similar to that. And then did that for a few times. And then somehow or another, crystal meth got in the mix. When crystal meth got in the mix, that's where everything started speeding up very, very quickly. Things started to fall apart real quick. I started staying up for days on end without any sleep. No problem.
How old were you?
18. I was 18 years old. You know what they call smoking crystal meth? They call it chasing the dragon. Sinners call it that. It's exactly what it is.
Why?
I don't know why they call it. Maybe when one of the first ways I did it, they had it on foil, burn the bottom of the foil, and then it steams up. And maybe, I guess, the smoke looks like a dragon, and you chase it and you're inhaling it, you know, you're taking it in your system, and that's how you get high.
Well, I know that this is one of the most destructive drugs that people can take. What did this begin to do in you?
It gave me a lot of energy. It made me, it actually ended up making me irresponsible. And I got fired from my job. I got fired from that first job that I was at for 11 months. We had a contract company that worked on that job with us. And I didn't get along with the bosses. They were pretty racist. They would say some racist things about Mexicans. And so I didn't really care about that job. But the contract company, all of their workers, which was probably about 15 to 20 guys, I trained them on measuring the hydraulic hoses, the fittings, the piping, how to put things on, how to work. And they saw that I wasn't lazy. I just didn't get along with the managers. And so as soon as I got fired, I was making $7.75 an hour. The very next day, they saw that I needed a job. They gave me a job with like a $3 or $4 raise. And so that was cool. And then that company, first company, Besser Apco, I think now it's called Apco. The second company was Hiroko International. And so then I started working with that other company for a while, but I'm doing crystal meth now. And so I'm missing work some days. Some days I'm going to work. It got really bad, man, where I would be doing crystal meth all the time. There's a regular household light bulbs that I learned how to take apart just to use it as a pipe. You take off that black part on the top, peel off the metal around the bulb, and this is how bad it was. This is where I was. I would put a straw in there, put the meth in there, be driving down the highway on 410 with my knee, holding the light bulb with one hand, holding the lighter with the other hand, straw in my mouth, driving, going maybe 75 miles an hour down the highway, smoking meth. It was bad. And then ended up losing that job. And then that was right around Christmas. And so that devastated our family, devastated. I was filled with anger, filled with paranoia. And we got into some bad family arguments. And I ended up getting income tax a few weeks later. And when you have a drug addict and an alcoholic that gets this flood of money out of nowhere, they take it and they go party with it. And then all of these friends from the woodworks come out and they want to do drugs with you. They want to have a good time with you. And so it started escalating very quickly. Yep, on January 7th, that's the day that I ended up separating from my son's mother. And I remember after that, I still had quite a few bit of money. And so we would party And I had my brother living with me at the time. I had guys from high school that I still sometimes would skate with, not very serious, but just go have a good time with. I had them coming over. We started battle rapping. I introduced them to meth. And one time we stayed up a whole week straight, or I did. And some of the guys, they didn't, but I did. And a whole week straight, no sleep. One of those nights, we were battle rapping, and I'm humiliating some guys, man. You could just see it on their face. They don't like what I'm saying. There is no restraint. There's no self-control. All bets are off, and people are getting embarrassed. And so it's not a good situation. We get into some arguments, whatnot. And then one of the guys, his name was Alok. That's what we called him. He was working on an instrumental on the laptop. And I told him, hey, slow down the melody, because I'm from Texas. I like Houston rap. I like slow beats. And so he started to slow it down, and then he changed it. And I said, man, it sounded good. Why'd you change it? And he just completely ignored me. And I'm like, man, this guy's stubborn. And so I grabbed a piece of paper and I started asking these guys questions. We stayed up the whole night on drugs that night. And so I asked this guy some questions, and I'm asking him, when is somebody going to listen? And their response to me, this guy's response, someone's not going to learn unless they're ready to learn. And so my goal of asking them questions is I'm going to write down their words, their answers, and I'm going to put it in their face. And I'm going to say, look, man, this is you. You're stubborn. And so what ended up happening is I kept asking them questions. I actually still have these papers. It was 2 papers. And on these answers that they're giving me, they're being very honest. And so when you're a battle rapper, or when you're a rapper, you got to keep it real, because if you don't keep it real, you're going to get caught up and somebody's going to embarrass you. And so these guys are telling the truth. And so I'm writing down some statements about struggles that people go through, the reasons why people won't listen, the reason why people are stubborn. But then out of nowhere, the light bulb goes on, and I see that this paper is nothing but truth. And so I start asking myself, where's this truth coming from? And so during that time, I had a lot of confusion. I had a lot of frustration, a lot of arguments with my oldest son's mother, and a lot of lies were going on. People were doing things behind my back. I couldn't prove it. I just had that instinct, right? That sense. And so here I am, frustrated, confused. My life is kind of falling apart. And so I start looking for the truth. And I started asking people like, hey, man, what's up with this truth? What do you think about this? The fact that it's all truth. And people weren't really getting it. And then a little bit after that, I remember I went to my mother's house. I met my sister. I wasn't in good terms with them because I was on drugs. I didn't want them to see me like that. So I kept some distance. And I remember talking to my sister. I said, hey, what do you think about this? All this truth on this paper. And she said, my professor said, what's true to me might not be true to you. And so she's giving me the argument of relativism, which at that time, I didn't know that's what it was. But I was in my heart, I'm like, no, man, there's something called truth that's objective. That it doesn't matter what you believe. It's still true. But I'm not a Christian. Nobody's witnessed to me. I'm just yearning for truth. I want stability. My world is spinning, and I want something that's not moving so I can regain, clarity in life. And so that's what started me on the journey for truth.
Well, that is absolutely incredible to me. This is not a story that I hear very often. You were so bound and you were lost, with the drugs and just. So I guess what I'm wondering is, what do you think opened you up to this hunger to know the truth?
It was how dark it was. It was the pain that I was going through. I was getting high, and for a lot of people, they would say, man, you were living the life, I was selling drugs, making money. I had a ton of weed in my freezer, I guess trying to keep it fresh, whatnot. I had lines of cocaine all over the table. I had joints rolled up, crystal meth. I had people coming over with bottles of Jose Cuervo, and I had all that. I had friends coming over to buy drugs. So I was making money. I didn't even have to pay for my habit because I was making enough money. And so other people were paying for my habits. And most people would say, man, you were living the life. That was the party life, going to house parties and different things. But I was in a lot of pain, man, a lot of emotional, spiritual pain. During that time, I was busting my butt trying to provide for my son, working 58 hours a week. And I got really good on that job. That company, they ended up sending me to Lafayette, Louisiana to go fix a conveyor belt on the forge on I forgot what it's called, a barge over there. And then they sent me to North Texas. And so all that's going on and I'm busting my butt. But my son's mother, I think she went outside of the marriage. To this day, I don't have proof about it. And so it was with people who were close to me. And so I was devastated. The evidence was there. Here I am. I'm trying to be responsible. I'm trying to take care of life and have a good foundation. And going through that pain. And I remember one time that she said, this is just to show how real it was, to my face in front of other people. She said, even if I did, you'll never find out. And so, I mean, that's pretty self-incriminating right there. But it's true. And so I'm going through this pain. I'm confused. I'm frustrated. I know what the truth is, but I can't put my finger on it. And that frustrated me even more. And then I remember asking my brother, and this is where God started to really come in. I remember asking my brother, what's going on in my life? Why is my life falling apart? My brother is 10 years older than me. And he told me the biggest trick the devil pulled is convincing the world he doesn't exist. My brother's not saved at the time when he tells me this.
Where did that come from?
Yeah. He's not saved. He's not saved at that time. Just a few years ago, he got saved for a little while, but then he went back out to the world. He's not saved. What he's doing is he's quoting a movie. But my brother's a genius, man. My brother, he was a gang member. He was with Ambrose. And got locked up. He had friends die in his arms there in San Antonio. And so I saw all of that, him go through that, come over to my house with a gun, whatnot. But he was a genius. He was very, very smart, straight A student in school. And anyways, he told me that he's quoting a movie and he's being cool. He's trying to be cool. He doesn't know that he's quoting Revelations 12, the deceiver of the world. God knows. And God, in that moment, God opened my eyes and God showed me the world, like very, very quickly, just shows me the world and says, yeah, look at the way everybody's living. They're all living like they're going to get away with their sin. There's no consequences. They can live however they want and that hell doesn't exist. And the devil wants them to live that way, convinced that he doesn't exist. There's no consequence to sin. And I remember when my brother said that, man, here I am. I'm a drug dealer. I'm a battle rapper. I'm filled with anger. I'm tearing people apart, man. And I remember it was like I could see the silhouette of the enemy, the devil, standing next to my patio doors, one leg up, one leg down, just chilling, man, saying, yeah, you work for me. That's right. And I remember I was like, man, that's not going to be for long. You just know that's just not right. During that time, I remember sitting there at the table when my brother said that and going through all the pain, this thought comes into my mind. Now I know where it came from. It came from God. The thought was, do you want your son to taste a tablespoon of the pain that you're going through right now? And my answer was no. Not do you want him to go through the full on pain, but just a little bit of the pain. Do you want him just to taste a little bit? And my answer was no. That pain was horrible, man. It's indescribable how bad it hurt. And so that's where I was. I was confused. I was frustrated. And that's why I was like hungry for truth. Like, okay, where is it at? How can I get it?
Wow, that is an incredible story. I'm just thinking what a gift it was that you had your son at this time, because if not, man, this could have gone a much darker direction. You know, it could have gone into self-destruction, but because he was there, because you have that reason to live in your life, this is what is going to steer you in the right direction. So how does this hunger for truth, how does it connect to the gospel?
Yeah, man, I told my son he's my hero. In one sense, he really is a part of it. And so I took that paper. I talked to my sister. She said, yeah, truth is different to certain people. I still understood that, no, there's something that's truth, but I couldn't articulate it. And so I was frustrated. I was in tears, man. This is how desperate I was for truth. In that conversation, I was in tears. I left my mother's house and I'm headed back to my apartment. And when I'm driving back to my apartment, my mother lives on she lived on Hunt Lane at that time. And there's this little trailer home church there. It's a Methodist Spanish church. And so on the side of the church, there's a white cross. And I had an old school slide phone, and I take a picture of the cross, and then I look at the picture on my phone. It's tiny screen, man, and it's a little white dot on the phone. And so I turn around, I go to the church because I want to get this picture. I like photography, I like art ever since I was young. And when I drive into the parking lot, there's two pastors that are leaving. One of them is named Brother Macario, and the other one is Samuel Lopez. And I drive into the parking lot, and I get a better picture of the cross, which, by the way, man, I wish I can get my hands on that picture. It was a supernatural picture. It looked crazy. It was like a lit up cross. It was a dark night, and the cross was just like coming at you. And then those guys, they come up to me. You gotta remember, I look like a mess. I'm super skinny because of meth. I think I was probably wearing a muscle shirt at the time. I have a Honda Passport SUV. The back window's busted out. I probably smell like smoke. And here's this guy just coming up on this church property. They probably think I'm going to vandalize it or something. And they come out real quick. Hey, how can we help you? How can we help you? And I don't know how exactly we got into the conversation, but I told them about what I was talking about with my sister and this desire, this hunger I have for truth. And that's where everything began to click. Samuel Lopez, he told me, he said, you want to know the truth? I said, yeah, man, I want to know the truth. He said, you want to know the truth? He said, I'll tell you the truth. The truth is God. He never lies. He cannot lie. He cannot contradict himself. He said, the truth is God's word. It doesn't contradict itself. He said, geniuses walk the face of this earth. They try and prove the Bible wrong, but they cannot, because God doesn't lie. He said it predicts the future, and it comes to pass exactly as God predicted it, because God doesn't lie. God is the truth. And I never really heard it like that before. And so I said, okay, God's the truth. I wasn't convinced at that moment, but it was like the beginning of the journey to come and look for truth, which is rooted in God. I left that night, and then I went back home. This guy didn't pray with me, didn't do anything. We just had a conversation, probably exchanged numbers. I don't remember the details. I went home, and I went on the balcony where I did all my drugs, and it was a cloudy night, and I rolled up a fat joint, and I smoked it. And I was smoking that joint, and this is how bad of a stoner I was, and how bad I was hungry for the truth. I'm smoking this joint, and I'm thinking to myself, man, I've believed so many lies in my life. How do I know that I'm not believing a lie right now, that I'm getting high and I'm just smoking some paper? You know what I mean? And I kept smoking. And then I started looking for God. I think that man, he told me, read your Bible, get a Bible, read it. And so I asked him, where do I start? Said, start in the New Testament. And I started reading Matthew. And I got to Matthew chapter 6, verse 33, that it got my attention. It's what really, really opened my eyes. It says, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all the things that you need will be added unto you. And it stopped me in my tracks. And I said, whoa. I said, wait a minute. My life's falling apart right now. Everything is breaking down. I said, God, you can't lie. You said if I put you first, that you're gonna take care of me. All these things that I need, that you already know I need, I don't even need to mention it to you. You're gonna add them to me. I said, bet, I'll put you first, God. And so I put him first. I started reading my Bible like crazy. I read Psalms 119, and I really related to David because everything was coming against him. He had people that were coming against him, whatnot, and God was his refuge. And so I was like, yeah, man, I can understand that. And God became my refuge, and I was just hungry for the word of God. And so I started reading the Bible like crazy. I read through the Gospels real quick. My imagination was spiked. It was super alert. I was able to see, Jesus walking with the disciples. It became supernatural to me. It became very real to me. And then I go outside on that balcony where I'm smoking weed before. Now I'm reading my Bible, and there's a neighbor across the parking lot from me. I forget her name. But her boyfriend, his name was Marcos. He's from Louisiana. He's from the Boot. That's what you call Louisiana there. And I used to smoke blunts with this guy. And now she sees me reading the Bible. She says, hey, you need a job? I'm like, yeah, I need a job. And she basically says, come over to my apartment. I'll help you get a job. And so I go over there. She says, I work for Chase Bank. I've been working there for 10 years. She says, I can get you in. She says, I got Marco's other friends in, but they made me look bad. She said, don't make me look bad. I said, no. Just give me a job, man. And so,
man, what an opportunity.
Bro, I'm telling you, man. So this is how God works, man. He put everything back together. I did the application, whatnot. I was working at a telemarketing company, West Telemarketing, while I did that. And then about 3 weeks later, Chase calls me. They say, hey, we want to have an interview with you. I go into the interview, and we do a personality test. And they come out to me, and this has happened to me a couple times, man. They come out to me and they say, they're looking at me a little strange, and they're like, God's my witness. They said, nobody scored this high on a personality test. Like, we haven't had somebody score this high like this. And so I didn't know until later. God changed my mind, man. I'm thinking different. I'm thinking right. And so there's a favor there. And so we go into the interview. I do a role play with her about customer service, taking care of people's problems with their bank account. And we have such a good interview that I'm walking out and I'm closing the door. The door's cracked just a little bit. And she says, hey, don't tell nobody, but you got the job. And immediately God speaks to me and tells me, if she knew that you were on crystal meth just a few weeks ago, she would never confidently tell you, you got the job like that. God said, I did this. And I said, wow. Yes, sir. And he told me, people are going to tell you it's coincidence, that it was just happen chance or whatever. And he said, no, he said, don't believe that. I did this. And so I said, amen. And so I began to give him the glory and give my testimony. And now I'm hungry, man. I'm hungry for the truth. I remember I went there to the training class there at Chase, and we have a lot of people there, and I'm witnessing to them. And it's not like I'm forced to witness to, bro, it's just overflowing. And I'm witnessing to them, to the whole training class at the same time. And it's getting convicting. And what was amazing is they never really came against me. They knew that they couldn't because it was supernatural. It's like Jesus was sitting right there with me, and nobody had the audacity to try and come against it or fight it because it was Holy Ghost, man. And I remember one of the ladies there, I had a 1990 passport. It was broken down. I put it in the mechanic shop. I gave them about $2,000. I got it out. It had a blown head gasket. And so Yeah, those are really difficult to fix. And so I got it out. It still wasn't fixed. So this lady in my training class at Chase, she ended up giving me a ride to my apartment. And so here's this, skinny ex-drug addict. You could tell I'm still raw, man. My hair is incredibly short, and I still look like a little bit of a thug, a punk, so to speak. But this lady can see God in me, and she can feel it. She sees me minister to the class. And so she ends up giving me a ride to work, which is interesting, man. Just this last October, we went to conference. I'm at Olive Garden with the landowner of this building that I'm in right now in Vietnam. And that lady, the lady that walks into the Olive Garden is the lady that gave me a ride to work. And so I'm like, man, I know her. And then I'm like, oh, no, that's the lady that gave me a ride to work when I first got saved. So I went and introduced myself. And she remembered me. It was crazy, man. It was such a sweet reunion, man. A little taste of heaven, what heaven's going to be like. And so that's the way it was for a while, maybe about a month. And then somebody gave me a brand new vehicle. They gave me a Suzuki Forenza, my mother, man. She gave me a Suzuki Forenza. It was a 2005 Forenza, and this was 2006. So literally, it's a brand new vehicle, all black, got a sunroof, I think I had got some rims for it, some gunmetal rims, man. I love that car. It was nice, man. But the idea is that when I made the decision that I'm going to put God first, that he said, I'm going to give you what you need. I know what you need. I'm going to take care of you. So here you go. He gives me one of the best jobs in America at Chase Bank. And then he gives me a vehicle. And I remember when I read that verse, one of those requests was a wife. Well, I met my wife at Chase Bank. That's where I met Roxanne, which is so interesting, man. The day that Eric's mother had and I separated was January 7th. Come to find out later, that's my wife's birthday. And so I don't know how all that is connected. I still think it's cool, man. It just shows me that God's involved, man. God knows what's going on.
Wow.
And so, that was that. And then during that season, right before I went to Chase, I had a $900 balance with my apartments. They were going to evict me. They gave me the 3-day notice already. And then I went into the office. And there's just this favor on my life. And I tell the management office, what's going on in my life, whatnot. I got saved. I'm turning things around, whatnot. And they told me, they said, don't worry about the $900 balance. Just give us $100 and you're fine. It's okay. So what? Apartments don't do that, man. They will evict you real quick. And so, and again, all that is God. And God is in the background watching this happen and communicating to me, you keep me first, I'm going to take care of you. And at that point, after those 3 big blessings, because I didn't know my wife was part of the blessing until later on. After those 3 big blessings happened, I was like, all right, God, you got my attention. What do you want me to do? I'll do it. And I began to ask questions.
Yeah, funny you should ask.
I began to ask questions to God. And I said, okay, God, you are who you say you are. Heaven is real. People are blind. They're deceived just the way I was. I said, how do I tell them? How do I inform them? How do I get their attention? And I remember it was a Sunday morning. I'm having this conversation with God while I'm sitting in church. While the pastor's preaching, I'm talking to God. And in the sermon, the preaching of the feeding of the 5,000, God is speaking to me, and God's telling me, give me what you have. I don't have much. My life was jacked up. Give me what you have. Put it in my hands. I'm going to break it, which I've found out later on. That's what all the trials and the opposition, the hindrance, the religious Christians that like to come at people was involved in that. People who didn't want me to get married to my wife. God said, I'm going to break it. You're going to be going through some trials, but then I'm going to bless it. And then I'm going to multiply it. And I'm going to meet the need of the 5,000. And then the idea is that he's going to reach the world or the multitudes through my life when I surrendered to him. So I said, all right. And I remember in that sermon, God's my witness, I saw a line, man, because my desire was for the world. I saw a line go from North America, United States, all the way over towards the top of Asia. And it was a line going like this. I saw this in my mind. And I'm like, yeah, amen. Let's reach the world. I don't know that I'm going to be in Vietnam about 14 years later. God knows. But the idea is I'm just going to put him first. And then, reading the Gospels where Jesus says, I am the truth, where he says you will know the truth and the truth will set you free. And it's exactly what happened to me, man. So I fell in love with the truth, and I learned to stay in love with the truth, meaning when I'm wrong, I have to tell the truth. I have to look myself in the mirror and say, you know what, you're wrong. Because I know as soon as I get away from the truth, I'm going back to that chaos. And I don't want to go back there. And so, yeah.
Right. Man, well, so what's interesting to me is that it sounds like this journey was, well, you tell me, was there any other, like, anybody like instructing you? But from what you described, it was kind of like you experiencing God, reading the Bible, and not a whole lot of other instruction around. Is that
That's the case? That is absolutely the case. I told people the vision as soon as I got that vision and I heard God. I have that paper too. I wrote down in the sermon, February 26, 2006. The day I surrendered completely to God and the calling, the feeding, the fight. I have that paper as well. I told that church, wow, was an all Spanish Methodist speaking church. I told them that about the vision, and they looked at me like, "Oh, that's nice, that's cute, kind of deal." And I'm like, "Yeah," and I'm like, "Well, yeah."
Pat you on the head.
What the heck? Like this is God, man. Like God wants us to reach the world. We can do this. It's so real to me. And they didn't get it. And so they didn't have the vision the way they should. And they didn't have discipleship. And so those two big ingredients were missing in that church. Because of that, although I'm a radical convert and in a very real sense, God led me over there, I didn't stay there. I ended up backsliding. Some days I would go to church smoking a Black and Mild. I'm still raw. During that time, I was on probation. I had to go report every month and give a drug test, which is incredibly humbling, humiliating. And so, yeah, it was whack. And so going through all that trial, still going through all that pressure, I wasn't delivered from everything. God let me taste some consequences. And so, but they wouldn't challenge me to stop smoking Black and Milds and serve God. And what ended up happening is I met my wife February 2007. This is a year later. I met her. I'm still reading my Bible. I'm still hungry from God. I don't want to go back to the chaos, but I don't know how to be discipled. I don't know how to fulfill that vision. And so I'm reading my Bible. We would go to bars. There's a bar over there, it used to be there, called Legends Sports Bar. And I'd go there. I'd be reading my Bible. My wife thought, at the time, she thought, who's this nut who walks around at Chase Bank with his Bible? Plus looking like a thug, really, really short hair with the edge up, like who's this guy? And so I went to those bars at the same time with her. And I remember witnessing to the waitress or the waitress, and it gets Holy Ghost, man. She starts to get convicted. And then out of nowhere, she stops me and she says, hey, wait a minute. So why are you here? And I remember when she said that, man, this deep conviction just fell on me. And I was like, I just felt bad, man. And still reading my Bible. And I remember one time I went to her house, and her mother, her father, her brother, and her sister, they're there. And they see me reading my Bible on their kitchen table, and they start asking me questions, and God shows up. And you can feel the presence of God. You can feel peace. You can feel that there's hope, that God has direction for all of our lives. And so her sister, who, by the way, is homosexual. They're still homosexual to this day, her sister and her brother. And I love them like crazy, man. They're family to me. And so her sister asked, why don't we go to church? And I said, why don't we go to church? And then her dad said, yeah, I heard about the door. Well, I had heard about the door too a few months back, maybe about a year before. And my mother had went to the door to Pastor Ruby's church because her coworker had hit her son pass away, Alec Luchuga. And so she went to the funeral. And I remember when she went to the funeral, she came home and she's weeping and she's like, Mijo, I love you. Keep serving God. And because the guy was around my age. And so she had told me, man, she told me that's a really nice church. And I remember I'm radically saved and I'm listening to her say that's a really nice church. I was like, okay, there must be some substance there in order for her to say that, because she wasn't going to church at the time. And so I filed it away. And then that day that my father-in-law says, I heard about the door, I said, oh yeah, I heard about it too. So we started going October 2007 and never stopped going. And then slowly God began to show me that this is where the vision is that I gave you. And this is where you're going to get jammed. This is where you're going to get discipled. People are going to dig into you. And I remember I was shacking up with my wife, and January 2008, just a few months later, Chris Todd, he was the assistant pastor at the time, he challenged me and he said, separate until y'all get married. And so we did. That lasted 2 years and 8 months. Nobody's counting. That was a long time. And
Wow.
it was because at the age of 18, I had a shotgun wedding. So I was already married. I was previously married. And so I had to go through the divorce. And at that time, God had already spoken to me very clearly. I tried to do due diligence. I tried to invest in that relationship and take care of that. And there came a point where my oldest son's mother said to me, I don't believe in one God. I believe in many gods. And when she told me that, it was like God in the next sentence said, if you stay with her, you will not serve me. And so I started to have this peace, like, okay, it's okay if I move on. I'm not going to be damned and go to hell. God is, and that's where during the same time, somebody showed me 1 Corinthians chapter 7, and where it says, God has called us to peace. If the unbelieving one leaves, let them leave. Do not chase after them, or else you're basically going to damn your own soul as well. And so God gave me some peace to move on. And so we get there into Pastor Ruby's church, January 2008. Pastor Stacy Diller's preaching a revival. He prays for me to get filled with the Holy Ghost. He had opened the altar call. He said, anybody wants to get filled, come. I ran up there because I was watching this. I was observing this. It caught him off guard a little bit because I was still raw, man. I'm wearing a polo shirt. I ain't got no tie on. I'm a raw sinner. You know, I just want what God has for me. And so he said, you've been wanting this, right? You've been asking for this. I said, yeah. I said, if it's of God, I want it. And so he laid hands on me, prayed for me. I got filled immediately. In that service, Pastor Roman was still there. He was getting ready to go to Bolivia. And then the next service, he came up to me and he told me, he said, did Stacy give you a word? And I was raw, man. So he said, did Stacy give you a word? I was like, yeah, he gave me a word. I was like, hip hop still. I was like, yeah, a word. You know, we talked, you know, I don't know what's a word. And so it caught him off guard. And he was like, shook his head. He was like, yeah, anyways, God gave me a word for you. You're going to get sent out quick. There's going to be people who are going to work against you. They're going to fight against it. They're not going to like it. He said, you need to stay around Christians who take their walk with God serious. This was January 2008. I've only been in the church for like 2 months, 2.5 months. And he gives me that word. And what is sent out? Like, you know what I mean? I'm still a new convert. And so I catch on and I'm like, okay, I get it. And it happened exactly how he said. We went through a lot of trials, people working against us, people who were saying it's not right for you to move on with Roxanne. You need to go back to whatever. But God already said no. And so people thought like we were sinners or whatever and just fighting against God. But I started getting discipled. That's where I saw the vision. And after we got married, we were Bible study leader assistants for Gabriel Aguilar and Tiffany. Had a blast with them. And then the next year we were assistants for Hector and Nicole Ortiz, which was such a blessing to be ministering close with him. And then while we were assistants, the second year, random Sunday morning, Pastor Ruby calls me into his office, tells me he has an opportunity for me, and says Tampa, Florida has opened up an opportunity. And so he asked me, "Where's your wife?" I said, "She's at home. Our kids are sick." He said, "Can anybody go watch your kids?" I was like, "Yeah." So I called Roxanne. I said, "Hey, Pastor wants to talk to us." And I go and I pick her up, and she gets in the car, and I'm like, "Yeah, he has an opportunity for us in Tampa." And she says, "Shut up." So I said, "Okay." I said, "All right." And so I just drive to church, and then we walk into the office. Mind you, I'm in crutches because I blew out my ACL at the time. And so we walk into the office, and Pastor goes, "Did you tell her?" And then all of a sudden she starts to say like, "Oh, okay, this is not a joke. This is for real." And we have about 15 minutes. I told Pastor, "When do we need to get back to you?" He says, "You got 15 minutes. I'm going to announce it right now." And so, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And so we were like, "Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, okay, we'll do it." And so we got announced. We go into the sanctuary, and we sit down. Here I am with my crutches on the side, sitting down in the chair. And then Pastor says, "Yeah, Chris and Jennifer Todd, they've been ministering there in Tampa for 4.5 years. We thank them for their sacrifice, for their investment, and now taking over their place, Eric and Roxanne." And you can hear the church all as one body go, "Yeah, bro." They're like, "What?" Bro, it was hilarious. And I'm standing up in crutches. God has a sense of humor. And yeah, man, that's how we got launched out.
Wow. What an incredible testimony. You know what I love about it is your commitment to the truth is what started this journey, and it's what continued you down the road. And you said it, man. Jesus is the truth, and the truth will set you free. But along the way, the truth will knock you up a few times. Yeah. It'll beat you down, and it'll hurt you. But if you stick with it, you know, the truth will set you free. And that's what I'm hearing from your testimony.
And then, a thought on that is because I was hardcore truth, I wasn't very gracious because it was just truth. Truth is not merciful. Truth is you're either of me or you're not. But then God later on, he opened my eyes. He basically said, "Eric, full of grace and truth. The word became flesh, dwelt among us, full of grace and truth." It's a both. It's a balance. I said, "Oh, okay. I'll be patient. I'll be merciful with people." All right.
Yeah, that can be a difficult balance to find. But man, I've got some questions about your pastoral ministry, and want to hear about how you eventually made it to Vietnam. But we're going to say goodbye to our free listeners, and we're going to jump over to the premium block. If you want to hear the rest of that, go hit that subscribe, and you support World Evangelism with your premium subscription. We want to encourage you to do that, and we want to say thank you, man, for the incredible testimony, and we want to thank you for listening. If you will give us a few moments to take a break, and we'll be right back with part 2 of this incredible Testimony Tuesday.